ABC premiered TV's first animated primetime series, The Flintstones. In honor of the anniversary, some Flintstones trivia. It was loosely based on the Honeymooners and originally aimed at adults.
On September 30th, 1960, American television changed forever when The Flintstones premiered on American Broadcasting Company as the first animated series to air in prime time. What most viewers remember today is a colorful Stone Age family, a catchy theme song, and a lovable cast of characters who felt safe for children. What many forget, or never knew, is that the show was originally conceived as adult entertainment, inspired heavily by the working-class marital comedy of The Honeymooners. In its earliest days, it was not aimed at kids at all. It was a satire of suburban life, filled with jokes about marriage, money problems, gambling, and social pressures. Even more startling, in its first 2 seasons, the characters appeared in animated cigarette commercials for Winston, lighting up on screen and singing advertising jingles to American families. Fred and Barney did not merely exist alongside sponsorship. They actively endorsed it, stepping outside their stone houses to smoke while their wives worked indoors. The irony of those early years would only become darker with time, as every original principal voice actor later suffered from smoking-related illnesses, casting a shadow over those cheerful commercials that were eventually edited out of syndication. The creative minds behind the series, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, were already legends long before Bedrock existed. During their years at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, they had created Tom and Jerry, earning 7 Academy Awards and establishing themselves as masters of theatrical animation. But in 1957, MGM shut down its animation department, abruptly ending the era they had known. Forced to pivot, they entered the emerging world of television and launched new properties such as the Huckleberry Hound Show. Though these projects paid the bills, they were perceived largely as children's fare, and Hanna-Barbera longed to prove they could create something for adults in the lucrative primetime slot. The search for the right concept became a chaotic period of experimentation. Ideas involving ancient Romans, hillbillies, pilgrims, and other settings were tossed around without conviction. The breakthrough came when storyboard artist Dan Gordon suggested setting the story in prehistoric times. He sketched 2 rough characters clad in animal skins, including a gag featuring a bird functioning as a record player. That playful image unlocked the creative direction that would define the series. Character designer Ed Benedict refined the look, giving the Stone Age world a stylized mid-century modern aesthetic. Joseph Barbera insisted that, despite their primitive tools, the characters should appear neat and respectable. Wilma's oversized stone necklace echoed elegant pearls, and the homes resembled suburban ranch houses carved from rock. Even the show's name underwent turmoil. Initially titled The Flagstones, it drew legal concern from cartoonist Mort Walker, whose comic strip family bore the same name. After a brief stint as the Gladstones, the production ultimately settled on the Flintstones. Selling the concept proved nearly as difficult as creating it. In early 1960, Joseph Barbera traveled to New York, armed with a short pilot and storyboards, enduring weeks of lukewarm receptions from network executives. On his final day of pitching, he met with ABC, which agreed to order 28 episodes. With that decision, television history shifted. The resemblance to the Honeymooners was impossible to ignore. Fred Flintstone mirrored Ralph Cramden's bluster and insecurity, while Barney Rubble echoed Ed Norton's loyal sidekick persona. Wilma and Betty reflected Alice and Trixie, patient wives navigating their husbands' schemes. Even Jackie Gleason noticed the similarities and was reportedly advised he could pursue legal action. Ultimately, he declined, wary of being remembered as the man who killed a beloved show. No lawsuit was filed, and the Stone Age comedy continued uninterrupted. Perhaps the most controversial element of the early seasons was the Winston cigarette sponsorship. From 1960 to 1962, Fred and Barney appeared in animated segments promoting the brand with the slogan, "Winston tastes good like a cigarette should." These were not subtle product placements. They were direct endorsements, with characters lighting cigarettes and singing jingles. As cultural attitudes toward smoking shifted, these ads vanished from reruns. Yet the health consequences lingered. Alan Reed, the voice of Fred, died of heart disease and emphysema. Mel Blanc, who voiced Barney while also providing iconic characters like Bugs Bunny, died of heart disease and emphysema as well. Bebe Bernadette, the original voice of Betty, succumbed to lung cancer. Jean Van Der Pil, Wilma's enduring voice, died from complications related to lung cancer. Even Henry Corden, who later replaced Reed as Fred, passed away from emphysema. The connection between the cast and smoking became an uncomfortable footnote in the show's history. The series evolved rapidly. When Fred and Wilma welcomed Pebbles in 1963, a massive marketing campaign followed. The decision to make the baby a girl reportedly stemmed from toy marketing logic, as a doll would sell better than a boy figure. The gamble paid off spectacularly, with millions of Pebbles dolls sold within months. The birth episode drew ratings, comparable to the famous Lucy Ricardo childbirth episode from I Love Lucy. As the audience skewed younger, Winston withdrew sponsorship and was replaced by Welch's grape juice. The tone of the series gradually softened, introducing fantastical elements like Bom Bom, and eventually the alien Great Gazoo, whose arrival in the final season signaled a departure from the grounded domestic satire that had defined earlier. Episodes, behind the scenes, dramatic events shaped the production. In 1961, Mel Blanc survived a near-fatal car accident that left him in a coma. According to widely repeated accounts, doctors attempted to reach him by speaking to him in the voices of his characters. When asked how Bugs Bunny was feeling, Blanc reportedly responded in character, marking the beginning of his recovery. Meanwhile, Jean Van Der Pil remained a constant presence, voicing Wilma across decades of episodes, specials, and spin-offs. Despite her central role, she accepted a one-time payment rather than residual rights when the show ended, a decision she later regretted as the series entered syndication worldwide. Over time, episodes were edited or removed due to stereotypes or outdated themes. The 2001 special The Flintstones on the Rocks depicted marital strain and counseling in a surprisingly somber tone, and aired only once. Meanwhile, merchandising flourished. Flintstones chewable vitamins became a dominant children's supplement. Brand and cereals like Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles, introduced in 1971, achieved enduring commercial success. The characters transitioned from adult satire to family marketing icons. In 1994, the live-action adaptation The Flintstones debuted, produced with the involvement of Steven Spielberg and starring John Goodman as Fred. Despite poor critical reception, the film was a financial success. Its 2000 prequel sequel, The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, failed commercially. Later revival attempts stalled, though a critically praised comic book reimagining by DC Comics explored philosophical themes within the Stone Age setting. Fan theories emerged over the years, suggesting Bedrock might represent a post-apocalyptic future rather than the distant past, fueled partly by the crossover special The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones. Continuity inconsistencies, disappearing characters, and shifting details added to the mystique. Even the beloved theme song Meet the Flintstones, introduced in the third season, was retroactively inserted into earlier episodes, creating the illusion of permanence. What began as an adult-oriented satire evolved into a multi-generational franchise, filled with contradictions, reinventions, and cultural shifts. Beneath the prehistoric gags lay reflections of modern anxieties about marriage, money, addiction, and identity. The Flintstones survived network skepticism, legal threats, sponsorship controversies, tragic losses, and tonal reinventions. More. Then 6 decades later, Bedrock remains a symbol of animation's ability to adapt, transform, and endure. Its history is layered and surprising as the stone walls of Fred Flintstone's home. As the decades passed, the legacy of the Flintstones continued to grow in ways its creators could never have predicted. What began as an ambitious experiment to bring animation into primetime gradually transformed into a cultural institution, one that reflected not only shifting tastes in entertainment, but also broader changes in American society. When the series first aired in 1960, television itself was still young, and the idea that cartoons could occupy the same evening space as live-action sitcoms was revolutionary. The gamble paid off. audiences connected with the prehistoric setting, layered over recognizable suburban problems, mortgages, demanding bosses, jealous neighbors, and marital misunderstandings. Beneath the stone tools and dinosaur appliances, viewers recognized themselves. Fred Flintstone, loud and impulsive, yet deeply insecure, embodied the anxieties of the American working-class husband. He labored at the quarry under Mr. Slate, constantly, worried about job security and finances. His schemes to improve his status or win quick money often backfired, creating tension at home. Unlike many later animated patriarchs, Fred's flaws were not merely comedic exaggerations. They reflected genuine adult struggles. His gambling habit, referenced multiple times across the series, hinted at addiction and loss of control. In certain episodes, Wilma explicitly mentions that Fred had once gambled away everything they owned, requiring psychiatric help. Such storylines were bold for a 1960s animated series and underscored the show's original adult orientation. Wilma Flintstone, voiced consistently by Jean Vanderpeel for decades, served as the emotional anchor. Calm, practical, and often wiser than her husband, she represented the steady force holding the family together. Her patience with Fred's antics mirrored the dynamic seen in the Honeymooners, yet Wilma's characterization gradually softened as the series shifted toward a younger audience. The addition of Pebbles marked a turning point. What had been a marital comedy expanded into a family narrative, and merchandising interests began influencing creative decisions more openly. The marketing success of Pebbles dolls demonstrated the immense commercial potential of animated characters beyond the television screen. Meanwhile, the supporting cast deepened the world of Bedrock. Barney Rubble, brought to life by Mel Blanc, balanced Fred's bombast with warmth and nervous loyalty. Betty Rubble, originally voiced by Bea Benaderet before her departure, endured a quieter legacy. For years, Betty's absence from certain merchandising lines, most famously Flintstones vitamins, became a curious footnote in franchise history. Manufacturing challenges reportedly made her thin waist difficult to mold into tablet form, leading to her omission for decades until public. Demand finally restored her place. The incident illustrated how commercial logistics could shape even the most beloved fictional families. The Great Gazoo's arrival in the final season symbolized the show's late-stage identity shift. A tiny green alien from the planet Zatox, Gazoo floated above Bedrock, offering sarcastic commentary and calling humans dum-dums. While intended to refresh the series and compete with contemporary fantasy sitcoms, his presence divided fans. Some saw him as imaginative. Others believed he marked the moment the show lost its grounded satire. He appeared in only a handful of episodes before the series concluded in 1966, leaving behind unanswered questions about his storyline and purpose. After the original run ended, syndication ensured the Flintstones would never truly disappear. Airing in over 80 countries, the show reached generations who had not been alive during its primetime debut. Its theme song became instantly recognizable worldwide, often ranking among the most memorable television themes in surveys. Ironically, the early seasons had opened with a different instrumental piece before Meet the Flintstones replaced it in later broadcasts and was retroactively inserted into earlier episodes. Over time, memory reshaped history, and the theme felt timeless. The franchise expanded into spin-offs, specials, and crossovers. The 1987 television film The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones playfully connected the prehistoric past with a futuristic counterpart, sparking fan theories that Bedrock might represent a distant future rather than ancient history. Such speculation flourished because the show itself contained playful anachronisms: Christmas celebrations before Christianity, modern currency systems in a primitive setting, and social structures suspiciously similar to mid-century America. These contradictions added to the charm, while fueling imaginative reinterpretations. In 1994, Hollywood revisited Bedrock with the live-action film The Flintstones. Executive produced by Steven Spielberg and starring John Goodman as Fred, the film achieved major box office success despite critical disappointment. Its elaborate sets recreated the cartoon's stone architecture with practical effects and animatronics. Elizabeth Taylor appeared in a supporting role, marking one of her final screen performances. Yet critics argued that the story lacked the sharp satire that had once defined the animated original. A prequel sequel, The Flintstones in Viva Rock. Vegas followed in 2000 but failed commercially, suggesting that nostalgia alone could not sustain the franchise indefinitely. Attempts to revive the property continued over the years. Animated reboots were announced and later cancelled. A proposed series titled Bedrock, reportedly centered on an adult Pebbles, was shelved before production advanced. Comic book adaptations, however, offered one of the most surprising reinventions. DC Comics published a limited series that reimagined the Flintstones through a philosophical lens, exploring themes of war, religion, consumerism, and existential doubt. Critics praised it as unexpectedly profound, proving that even decades old. Characters could serve as vessels for contemporary reflection. Merchandising remained a cornerstone of the brand's endurance. Flintstones vitamins became a staple in American households, generating substantial annual revenue. Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles cereals maintained strong sales for over 50 years, cementing the characters' presence in grocery aisles long after their primetime era. The bright packaging and cheerful mascots contrasted sharply with the adult-oriented origins of the series, highlighting how thoroughly its identity had shifted. Yet beneath the cheerful marketing lay reminders of its complex past. Episodes removed, for cultural insensitivity reflected evolving standards. The early cigarette commercials, once common knowledge, became obscure trivia as networks excised them from reruns. The deaths of the original voice actors from smoking-related diseases cast a somber shadow over those advertisements. The industry that had once normalized on-screen smoking gradually confronted its consequences. In retrospect, the Flintstones stand as more than a cartoon about cavemen. They represent a transitional moment in television history when animation sought legitimacy beyond children's programming. They embody the tension between artistic ambition and commercial influence, between satire and merchandise, between adult storytelling and family branding. From its primetime gamble on American Broadcasting Company to its enduring global syndication, the series navigated legal threats, sponsorship controversies, creative reinventions, and cultural shifts. What remains remarkable is not simply that the Flintstones endured, but that they adapted. Bedrock evolved from a parody of suburban life into a multimedia empire. Its characters have been reshaped, recast, and reinterpreted across generations. And though the stone houses and dinosaur appliances may seem frozen in time, the history behind them reveals constant movement. An animated world reflecting the changing realities of the society that created it. As the cultural landscape continued to evolve through the 1970s, 1980s, and beyond, the afterlife of the Flintstones became a case study in how intellectual properties can outgrow their original context. What had started as a bold experiment in primetime animation gradually settled into something even more powerful, a permanent fixture of American pop culture. Children who watched the series in afternoon reruns often had no idea that it had once competed with live-action sitcoms in the evening schedule. For them, Bedrock was not a satire of working-class adulthood, but a colorful playground filled with dinosaurs, stone cars, and exaggerated slapstick. The shift in perception was so complete that many viewers were genuinely surprised to learn about the early cigarette sponsorship or the mature themes embedded in the first seasons. The Flintstones' endurance was fueled not only by nostalgia, but also by adaptability. Networks packaged the episodes in different formats, sometimes pairing them with other hanna-barbera properties to create programming blocks that emphasized lighthearted fun over social commentary. Over time, the sharper edges of the original scripts softened in public memory. Fred's gambling problem, Wilma's frustration, and the echoes of marital tension inspired by the Honeymooners faded behind the laughter track and the bright theme, song. The franchise became safer, more marketable, and more universal. Yet, beneath that safety, lay layers of complexity that scholars and critics would later revisit. Media historians began to view the show as a reflection of post-war American aspirations and anxieties. The suburban dream, home ownership, steady employment, and family stability was mirrored in Bedrock's stone architecture and quarry jobs. Mr. Slate, Fred's demanding employer, symbolized corporate authority, while Fred's frequent attempts to outsmart the system captured the frustrations of workers seeking upward mobility. In that sense, the prehistoric setting functioned less as escapism and more as camouflage for contemporary satire. The merchandising machine only intensified as decades passed. Flintstones branded products appeared in lunchboxes, pajamas, toys, and food packaging. The vitamins and cereals that carried the characters' likenesses proved especially enduring, embedding Bedrock into daily routines. Parents who had grown up with the show now introduced it to their children through supermarket aisles rather than television broadcasts. This commercial presence reinforced the illusion that the Flintstones had always been child-friendly, obscuring their more adult origins. Attempts to reinvent the franchise continued sporadically. Studios explored new animated adaptations, some of which never moved beyond development. High-profile producers expressed interest in updating Bedrock for modern audiences, though concerns often arose about how to reinterpret Fred without turning him into a caricature reminiscent of later animated fathers. The challenge lay in preserving his flawed humanity without alienating contemporary sensibilities. In a media landscape increasingly attentive to representation and cultural sensitivity, revisiting a 1960s property required careful recalibration. The franchise's relationship with controversy also persisted. Episodes once accepted without question were re-examined for stereotypes or outdated humor. Certain installments were quietly removed from rotation, reflecting broader societal shifts in what audiences considered appropriate. This pattern mirrored similar reassessments of other mid-century programs, yet the Flintstones animated format made the contrast between innocence and insensitivity particularly striking. A show built on Stone Age absurdity had, in some respects, been a product of very specific historical assumptions. Fan communities played a significant role in sustaining interest. Online forums dissected continuity errors, from Fred's changing home address to Dino's shifting personality. In early appearances, Dino behaved more like a human, even speaking in full sentences, before transforming into the barking, tail-wagging pet most viewers remember. Such inconsistencies became part of the franchise's charm. They invited speculation, humor, and creative reinterpretation. The crossover special, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, for example, inspired elaborate theories that Bedrock existed in a distant future rather than the distant past, with Orbit City floating above a post-apocalyptic Earth. Though never canonically confirmed, these ideas demonstrated the imaginative investment audiences continued to bring to the series. The live-action films of the 1990s and early 2000s revealed both the strength and fragility of nostalgia. The 1994 adaptation, The Flintstones, benefited from meticulous production design and the casting of John Goodman, whose physicality and comedic timing evoked Fred convincingly. The film's commercial success suggested that the brand still held considerable power. However, critical reception underscored the difficulty of translating animated rhythm into live-action storytelling. The sequel, The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, lacked the same momentum and failed to capture audiences' enthusiasm, signaling that the franchise's appeal was not invincible. Meanwhile, animation itself evolved dramatically. The success of adult-oriented animated series in later decades validated the path hanna-barbera had attempted to pioneer. Shows that openly targeted mature audiences demonstrated that primetime animation was no longer experimental. In retrospect, the Flintstones' 1960 debut appears visionary, even if its tone eventually shifted. It paved the way for future creators to explore animation as a medium capable of addressing adult concerns without sacrificing humor. The emotional resonance of the original voice performances also became part of the show's legacy. Alan Reed's booming delivery defined Fred's bluster, while Mel Blanc infused Barney with warmth and comedic nuance. Jean Vanderpyle's Wilma maintained consistency across generations, anchoring the franchise with familiarity. Their contributions shaped not only individual characters, but the entire texture of the series. As new actors stepped into these roles over time, comparisons were inevitable. The original voices carried a weight of authenticity that proved difficult to replicate. In academic discussions, the Flintstones are sometimes cited as an example of how mass media can reshape collective memory. The cigarette commercials that once accompanied episodes have largely vanished from mainstream awareness, removed from syndication, and seldom rebroadcast. New viewers encounter a sanitized version of Bedrock, unaware that Fred and Barney once served as spokesmen for a tobacco company. This selective preservation illustrates how cultural artifacts are curated over time, emphasizing certain elements while minimizing others. Ultimately, the Flintstones' story is one of transformation. It began as a daring attempt to bring animated, social satire into America's living rooms during prime time. It navigated legal tensions, sponsorship controversies, tragic health outcomes, merchandising revolutions, and shifting audience demographics. It expanded into films, comics, serials, vitamins, and countless licensing agreements. It weathered criticism and cancellation attempts, only to re-emerge in new formats and new contexts. More than 60 years after its debut, Bedrock endures not merely as a fictional town of stone houses and dinosaur appliances, but as a symbol of animation's capacity to evolve. The Flintstones demonstrate how a series can be shaped by economic forces, creative ambition, cultural norms, and audience expectations, all at once. What began as an adult parody loosely inspired by the Honeymooners ultimately became a multi-generational touchstone. Its history is layered, sometimes contradictory, occasionally troubling, yet undeniably influential. And in that layered history lies the true fascination of the Flintstones. A cartoon that was never just a cartoon, but a reflection of the era that created it, and the decades that kept reinventing it.